Good morning. Welcome to Mental Fortress Mondays. Selfishness Part 2. We are in control of our own happiness by being in control of how selfish we can be. How many people agree with that statement? And how many people agree that when we show up with selfishness, people in our social circles generally respect and appreciate you more? And your sense of worth and your confidence and joy will increase. 2 weeks ago, I introduced the topic of being selfish, and not that it's just a good thing, but that it's a necessity to improve our joy and happiness and quality of life for ourselves and those around us. Today, we'll continue on this topic. Welcome to Mental Fortress Mondays. I am Dr. Cheryl Carthouse. I am a naturopathic doctor. Our mission here is to explore the who, what, where, when, why, and how of mindfulness and what mindfulness-based practices can bring to us, how they impact our physiology, our ability to think, our performance, our work, both our work and hobbies, and then overall quality of life. I started this series during the pandemic to provide and help develop mental resilience. And there's still a lot of transitioning happening, lots of job changes, maybe even after effects of COVID. Many people have new roles that they're adjusting to, or maybe it's even just the stress that we've experienced that we're recovering from. My mission here is to provide guidance as to how we can build our mental resilience, our emotional intelligence, and to become better at navigating stress that we encounter every day, and then to recover more quickly and easily from chronic stress, something that is very prominent in our society today and something we've all just been through. We want to be more resilient when we encounter all of that stress for tomorrow and ultimately live happier and more fulfilling and, of course, joyful lives. We've established the difference between being selfish, self-absorbed, and self-centered. I'm going to go over those again today. All of these are about our intention and perspective. These are my definitions that I'm developing to provide framework around doing things for yourself in a really healthy way. Loving yourself in a way that we typically don't, and then treating yourself like someone you love, which we also usually don't. Defining the difference between selfish and self-absorbed and being self-centered really does help to answer a bunch of questions that I've often gotten on this topic of being selfish. So being self-absorbed is really a construct of what someone else thinks of you. It is this someone else judging or having a judgment about your behavior. It doesn't necessarily reflect the intentions of your behavior, and those are the really important key things. Your intentions determine if your behavior or your act is either self-centered or more of this healthy selfish that we're talking about. Often you might get caught up in how something might be perceived. We put energy into worrying about what other people are going to think. When we start assuming what others are thinking, we're projecting our own ideas onto what actually might happen, onto potential consequences of our actions. Our assumptions are most often wrong. Even if we think we know the person well, there are maybe certain fears that we've developed within that relationship or boundaries that we're afraid if we push against them that they will destroy the relationship or have really a huge negative impact. Maybe that's from past experience, maybe they've changed, maybe we've changed. Really, which one serves you best? And that's what we want to get a really good handle on, is at what point can you take a stand to then create your boundaries and hold your boundaries in a really healthy way, even when they might push against some of those boundaries with other people. Even if you do think that you know that person well, again, sometimes that can impact how we're thinking about a situation, but not really impact the consequences. And I've had a lot of those experiences in my life. If there's concern of how your actions might be interpreted, the simple way is to really clear the air and ask. Say we take a day for ourselves, away from typical responsibilities, and just take a you day. This is going to look different depending on what you would choose, different for everyone. And often people's concern is the impact of maybe leaving their responsibilities for the day. Someone else may need to look after the kids or the chickens or the pets. And you also might be taking a step away from work. Maybe that's leaving other people in a bad state somehow that you might think. You might just actually also need to tell other people that you don't want to spend time with them, or that you prefer to be on your own. And when that's not the norm of that relationship, it can really impact and provide a bit of tension in that relationship. It can be hard to put forward, hard to say, hard to do, especially if this idea of taking time for yourself pushes against those expectations of the relationship. Now, say you take a day for yourself with the intention of doing all of the things that would be good for you to ground, to find balance, to just be a little bit more joyful going forward. And your intention is to do it for positive reasons for yourself. The impact that it has on other people is entirely separate from your intention of doing it in the first place. And that's a really important distinction. It's not necessarily only going to impact you. It could impact other people as well. However, the intention of what you're doing comes from sort of a loving, this grounded, loving place of being selfish and of doing something that will put you in a better place so that you and everyone around you really can be in then a more stable place. Maybe it grounds you a little bit more, and your family and your children and your friends really will benefit, and all your coworkers, everyone around you and interacts with you really would benefit more from you being in that balanced, stable place. So this is what we're talking about when we talk about being selfish, is that your choices that support you, that support your joy, that support your personal boundaries, that can help you live happier, are going to leave you in a more grounded and balanced place. We do some things because we choose to take a step forward towards joy when you're doing it for yourself and really yourself alone. Again, it might impact others, but that's a side note. We do want to obviously take into consideration if it's going to negatively impact others in a way that doesn't really quite represent how we want to go forward. Someone might be upset, and that's okay. However, if the intention is really ultimately for you, and again, coming from this loving, healthy place, then it will ultimately help others as well. There are extremes, of course, when this can turn back into self-centeredness, and we're going to explore this a little bit in our model as well. When we come to disregard how our actions are impacting others, and even sometimes that acknowledgement of, okay, I understand that it's going to impact others, even if they are going to be upset about that, is enough. We just want to acknowledge it. We want to make sure that, again, we're coming from this grounded place and we're not doing it in spite of them. We're not doing it with ignoring the possible consequences of our actions, but we're doing it understanding that this still really is the best option for us to, again, come back to our balance. Being self-centered is often initiated out of fear. Making self-centered choices can be a protective mechanism, or it can come from the sense of not being good enough or a fear of losing something. A frequent example that I hear is doing something for someone else when you feel that it's not quite right. You feel that it pushes your boundaries or really isn't something that you want to do. There are many different scenarios here. And I'm only talking about those ones where you're choosing to do things for other people when you know that it's taking on too much. Often this happens at work, that we're essentially afraid to say no. And sometimes no, in this sense, is really going to help us balance out. It is often the fear of damaging a relationship or even a reputation or wanting to fit in with others. And it's this intention that differentiates the act of a selfish thing or of a self-centered thing. It's funny because the situation or how something plays out can still be exactly the same. It's really just that underlying intention that's different, and that energy that then is put into it and really energy that other people might read around that too. So I have a model here that matches up with our window of tolerance. How do we do selfish in a healthy way? What are your intentions? Where does your desire to do something for yourself come from? Is it a comfort? Is it self-sabotaging? This might relate to food or even exercise. I know several people who essentially are addicted to exercise. These are all socially acceptable mechanisms of coping. And the question is, does it truly serve you in that moment and tomorrow and in the distant future? Or does it seem to have a little bit of a control over you? Our mission here is to have full control over our bodies and minds, to engage in behaviors because we're choosing to, and not because we feel that it has control over us. By doing this, we increase our resilience and ultimately increase our joy. So bringing us to our model here. Okay. So we have our window of tolerance, which is when we're inside that window, everything is a little easier for us. We're in the zone, we're able to make good and healthy choices. And this is the place that we want to be, where everything's online, our brain functions are online, everything is really going the way that we want to. We are able to have more control over our decisions and over our behaviors. Inside the window of tolerance, we can be selfish from a grounded place with a loving intention, and it really is meant to build you up and to be grounded. Here we have this sense of self-love. Self-love is a whole different construct and really actually hard to do for very, very many of us, but this is where it falls into place when we can be there. What is good for the goose is good for the gander in this sense, especially when it comes from that loving place. Many people not always like it, especially if it rocks the boat. So this is talking about other people that might be impacted by your choices and by trying to change that status quo. But when you're engaged in a new behavior, it is almost always met with resistance, either from yourself or other people. And that's a very important thing to keep in mind. Change can be hard. Loving yourself can be very hard. Making change that focuses on loving yourself can be even harder. Then bringing us to self-centered. Self-centered gets split into two. We have self-centered up here in our hyper-arousal state, and we have self-centered down here in our hypo-arousal state. This is our freeze, our dorsal vagal nerve, our I can't stage, and up here we have our fight or flight stage, our sympathetic, I can, but kind of in this overdrive anxiety mode. Self-centered often is way outside our window of tolerance. It might be in, again, this fight or flight mode, where you're accepting more things on your plate, maybe at work, saying yes to more things that you actually don't feel comfortable saying yes to, in order often to not disturb the peace. To keep a certain reputation maybe. When push comes to shove, this type of behavior perpetuates our stress because it keeps us outside our window and it gives away our power. Self-centered can also be in this freeze mode, where we do things out of spite or we ignore the consequences of our actions. We might engage in self-sabotaging behaviors because we're experiencing difficult emotions that we're uncomfortable with or that we can't quite sit with. And so we want to, as best that we can, try to veer this self-centeredness back into selfishness by being able to hold our boundaries, understanding what's actually going to be good for us, and taking some steps towards that. And then we get to being self-absorbed. Self-absorbed is from an outsider's perspective. It is someone else's opinion about the actions that doesn't really consider the intention behind the action. Something can be selfish and others can view it as being self-absorbed at the same time. Often, when we continue a selfish perspective and really, again, do it with open communication because we're trying to do it in this loving way as best that we can, it eventually and more consistently will be able to shift things into a slightly new dynamic. It can help to release the tension that might be brought up between people. We can't control always what other people are willing to think, though, and they've come from their own perspective, their own, little mini traumas or big traumas, and it is our duty to not make assumptions about what they might be thinking and to not stress over what other people might be thinking. And a common reaction is to sit immobilized in fear of what other people are thinking. It is not a pleasant space to be in. It doesn't serve us, and it often leads to negative thought patterns about ourselves, which then perpetuates these cycles of stress. These are all based in our own assumptions, most often, when we're thinking that someone is thinking that we're being self-absorbed. If you're truly worried or concerned that someone is thinking and that it ends up being a negative thing, ask them. Or even better, just forwardly present what you're going to be doing and how you're going to be doing it in a way that then shares your intention with them. I'm doing this because I really need it, because it'll be grounded. I'm doing this because I find that that's just too much and it's just, that work isn't going to get done very well. Whatever it is, but honoring your boundaries and honoring that selfishness that you need to take towards being grounded and a little bit more level and being able to be more balanced. If something is truly good for us, if it is selfish in a grounded, loving way, we can change that status quo in order that other people will then help to understand, and it can be more helpful and beneficial really for everyone. Kind of that what is good for the goose is good for the gander kind of things, because you will be in a more grounded place. If someone still persists in thinking that your behavior or whatever you're doing is self-absorbed, be selfish and leave that stress with them. Sometimes it can actually be even hard to know if something that you're doing, something you want to do, is it selfish or is it self-centered? Where place is this coming from? Mindfulness can help us to understand that. When we take a moment to acknowledge how you're feeling in your body, and when you reflect on that idea, that behavior, whatever you're going to be doing, it can provide extra information that we really need to know, and this is the key, and the key is to practice. What about when we engage in an inspired thought? Kind of along those lines of being selfish. We want to be engaging in all of those things that inspire us, because that is where you ultimately will be in flow and be in all of these grounded, beautiful, creative spaces inside your window of tolerance. When we engage in a behavior that is inspired by love, it's like paying it forward. There's a movie called Paying It Forward. If you haven't seen it, it's a cute movie. Good examples of doing something that can help everyone from this place of genuine love and peace and joy, because you felt a little bit inspired to do it. I've been practicing listening to my body sensations as much as possible. Hopefully you have to. Through every little thing and every little and big decision that I make, or the behaviors that I do. Far from perfect, but the more that we do that, the easier I find it gets. In the past couple of weeks, I've talked about gauges and how to use these in unsafe and dangerous places. This has been over the last month, really, and we can most definitely, they can be used in order to provide us these positive experiences as well. As an example, have you ever felt an urge to do something for seemingly no reason, and then it turns out to be this wonderful, magical experience, this a body urge almost, or this sensation, and that can be a gauge and a nudge in a direction that helps you then to take steps towards being selfish, to take steps toward doing something out of love or out of this inspiration that you get. I encourage you to really tap into that and try and find something that's going to be a positive experience for you or a wonderful experience for someone else. And this can be where our selfishness has really positive impacts on the world. Typically they do, and typically we just don't hear or know about them. Our actions can be like this ripple effect. And when you drop a stone in a pond and you see those ripples continue and continue until they reach the edge of the pond, even if they're really subtle by the time they get there, but you can have that effect on the world. So I'll share this little story with you. One morning not too long ago, I was getting ready. I was taking my time. I had this urge to listen to a podcast, something that was a little bit inspiring. So I did, and then through this, a few thoughts came up. I thought of a friend, and that a friend would like it. So I sent it to her. She had some reply back that made me think of bringing her a tea. I had this rose tea that it's just, on certain days, it's just beautiful. She lives very close by, and so I dropped it off. I dropped off tea to her and went about my day. Several days later, another friend came and told me about this wonderful experience she had because of this whole series of events. It traced through 2 or 3 people that a few positive memes and messages I think got moved back and forth, and this one friend felt really inspired, and then she listened to this podcast and she felt really inspired, and it was all because that podcast was originally shared, and then this tea inspired my friend, and she was able to then essentially pay it forward, and she got inspired and sent this other positive thing to another person, and that trickle forward effect, pay it forward effect just kind of kept going on. When we step into these urges, into this magic, into this selfishness, we take action that can have this positive ripple effect and go farther than you ever will realize. And that's really important to acknowledge because we often don't get that feedback of something positive that we did really had an impact on other people, but know that it did. If that person, even if that one person went forward about their day and ran into 6 other people and just had a little bit more love that they were exuding that day, all of those people would feel it too. And there are because of your actions. So when you step into this positive mood, you may get a positive feeling through your entire body. And as you take action with this beautiful intention, others feel it as well. They might also engage and then listen to their positive urges because it's a little bit contagious, and then that ripple continues. We don't often get that feedback, and so that's the important thing just to remember. It will always amaze you as it does me when you do get it. You really can have a beautiful impact on the world, and when you step into that magic, and as I will call it, that selfishness, we won't, and not quite get caught up in all of the other ideas of what people might think. My friend could have thought it was strange that I brought her a tea, or maybe she wasn't even going to be home, or whatever it is. But that effort made me feel good, regardless of what happened on the other side. And then even with that, I'm going to go forward with a little bit more pep in my step that day. And then if she realizes, even if she realizes later the tea's cold and she comes home that night, she's going to also feel that love, and then again, be paying it forward, and all that kind of stuff. So what I want you to take away from this, for coming up on our half-hour mark here, is to acknowledge your intentions about your actions. It's really not about the act, and it's not about how things play out. It's about what the intention is inside you. So if there are obligations that you have to do, if there are things that you know you're probably going to do anyway, change your attitude about it, figure out what that intention is, and see if you can do it in this positive, loving way. 2, it's not about the situation, it's about how you feel about the situation. Not how other people feel about the situation, or how you interpret that others will feel about the situation. So if you feel that there's going to be a negative impact from other people, or that maybe there actually is a negative impact from other people, leave their stress with them. A lot of this is about stepping in, discovering what you truly need, and it's about loving yourself figuring out what that means can be really hard, and doing it can be even harder. And I challenge you to try to step into that. Do you know what you need on a given day? And do you know what's going to serve you best to get you grounded and into that place of a loving space, of a peaceful space, of stepping into that magic and inspiration? And I challenge you to get there. So, our first 30-day challenge. For the next 30 days, I want you to try and choose a couple of things and do them. They don't need to take long. They can be incorporated into your daily life. Whatever it is that you choose to do, make sure that you do that every single day. And here are a couple of options. One is to think a positive thought for at least 17 seconds, not very long. 17 seconds, your first thoughts when you wake up in the morning. Choose things that are light and easy to enjoy. This pillow is so comfortable, this bed is so cozy. It's easier in these moments to find simpler things to be joyful about. Don't make it into something that you really truly care about and that is going to make a difference for the rest of your life and all that kind of stuff, because if you are anxious about it or if there is some unease about it, it's not going to be something easy to be joyful about. So just pick something that puts a smile on your face. It could be the sunshine, it could be your cat or your chickens or your kids or your friends, whatever it is. Try to think as many of those thoughts as possible and hold each of them for 17 seconds. Option number 2, set a time to be mindful every single day and do this twice a day, morning and evening. Whatever you think is best in terms of time, it can be 2 minutes, it can be 5 minutes, but make sure that you sit there for the whole time and engage with it. Option number 3, incorporate at least one activity, physical exercise, movement. It can be short, it can be a minute or 2, and when they're introduced into a lifestyle, it becomes easier and easier to do it as part of your day. Improve your flexibility and mobility. I have a foam roller and I will often just roll on it for 30 seconds as I'm thinking of my next thing to do. Okay, just did the dishes, what else am I going to do? Or I'm taking a break from working or whatever it is. Try to incorporate these things and make them easy. Try easier. Number 4 option, breathing exercises. This is a really key one. We've done it several times, having this deep in-breath for 4 seconds and then a longer out-breath for 8 seconds. I do this every day after work. Usually when I'm driving my car home, I'll engage in this breath that helps to balance my nervous system, that helps to engage the vagal nerve for at least 20 minutes. It can be when you're doing something else. Try it easier. I'm going to commit to doing these things with you. Follow me on Instagram to participate. I would love to hear if you guys have other things that you're going to do to engage and to start getting yourself into this grounded, happier, more balanced place. When we do it for a certain amount of time, it can become a habit, but it also becomes this automatic thing that we start to engage in that brings us a little bit more groundedness and a little bit more joy. Let's change our headspace, let's build our mental fortress and our resilience and de-stress. Next week, we're going to be talking about mindfulness around food and around eating, a topic that comes up again and again. How can we fully gain control over these good habits, stick to them, and then avoid self-sabotaging behavior? I'll see you next week, and I will see you in between on Instagram as we engage in our challenge. See you then.